So we're really happy you're here. We have a surprise visit from Ran, who was in CEO meetings. Ran Balitzer, a friend and a part of our scientific advisory board, head of innovation at Clalit. And thank you, please. And also a public health expert. And we are going to have a discussion later today about also real life tracking of trauma and what can we learn from other public health issues. So I'm really glad that you could make it and wanted to hear from you. As you guys know, by the way, we have a lot of people that are not Israeli, Ran, but you can speak in Hebrew. We have translation. But Clalit has 5 million lives covered. This is the second largest HMO in the world after Kaiser Permanente in the US. It is a huge organization, and a lot of people around the world are looking at Clalit for support, especially because they have the most data in the world. And so thank you, Ran, for being with us and for agreeing to tell us a few words.
Thank you so much, and I will try to be brief. I'm here mainly to support the amazing work that's being done by ICAR and by the wonderful people that sit here in the audience. I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that we have a problem that cannot be solved in simple means. The needs of the public are great and are growing, despite the fact that we feel like we have went through the surge post the October 7 events. There's a continuous increasing needs of the public that we see in surveys, in our assessments. The needs are not diminishing. And in parallel to that, we do not have enough caregivers in order to satisfy and saturate those needs. So those two things do not and will not coalesce. There's no way this will fit in. It's a second grade mathematics that shows that this will not be solved in simple means. The only way forward is through a combination of several things. One is what we called here rivud ma'anim, or stratification of the responders. We will need additional types of responders that will take care of specific parts and specific components of the care. What Clalit is doing with Me'amnei Chosen, which is an amazing group of young people that are able to provide relief on specific domains with their specific qualifications, is showing great promise in providing some of this. Another component of this has to be data-driven and AI-driven. We will have to automate and to allow for digital solutions that are less encumbersome on our health personnel with their existing jobs. We will have to innovate because the need is the source of all innovation. We will have to innovate. And in Clalit and in Israel and in the people sitting here in this room, the solutions for crisis that is global in essence, I think might be available. It is through the experimentation and through the piloting and through the brilliant minds of the startupists that are providing, and the willingness of the health organizations to pilot, to try out, to assess, and to do a proper quantitative assessment and publication of the results, that we will be able to create the revolution that is so much needed in this domain, above and beyond all of the funding that's already being funneled to this important domain. So the combination of technology, of additional resources, and of the new types of stratification of responders, we might have a chance to withstand some of the challenges, great challenges we are facing. And I want to thank you, Gila, and I want to thank you, Eyal, and I want to thank all of you for taking part in this. This is of critical importance to this country these days. Thank you.
Philanthropy is truly playing a critical role across all of trauma health, and we want to thank philanthropists, those in the room and those across the field around the country and around the world who are dreaming and partnering and funding this very wide field of trauma health. And especially we want to thank now our ICAR partners here who helped get ICAR off the ground and are helping us to support the field here in Israel and globally. On our last panel, we touched on the role that philanthropy is now playing actually with technology, and we're excited about that new development. And that transitions us into this panel where we are taking a look at the role of not only philanthropy, but also impact investment and general investment here in trauma health. So please help me welcome to the stage Ariella Raviv, who will be moderating this panel with Dr. Gal Noyman, Ari Strasberg, Dalia Black, and Sara Tancman. Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you all for taking the time, especially for someone who's come the second. Can you hear me now? Is this better? So thank you all for taking the time. It's an honor to be on a panel with 4 women, so I'm excited especially for that. And we have a really interesting conversation coming up. And 1 month. Typically that's the default, so I didn't, but yes. So Ari, we will make sure to start with Ari for his introduction. So I just wanted to get started. I'm gonna have everybody introduce themselves and explain what financial tool you use that's moving the needle in mental health and trauma. So I would love to start with Ari, who is a very important part of this panel and represents 50% of the world's population. So go ahead.
So I hear.
No pressure.
It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. My name is Ari Strasberg. I'm the CEO of the 8400 Health Network. It's a very unique NGO that's basically a platform that's amassed about 400 of the leaders, not all the leaders, but many of the leaders within the health tech ecosystem in Israel, across the whole spectrum, from investors and business leaders, entrepreneurs, but also researchers, academia, from hospitals, physicians, all looking at the aim of how do we grow health tech in Israel, how do we connect it to the healthcare system in a much better way, and how do we make sure that both from an economic perspective, Israel grows, but also from a healthcare perspective. So it's kind of a very unique connectivity there. In addition to everything that 8400 has done over the years, and over these 400 individuals have amassed over 30 different programs, dedicated each and every one of them to different areas of promoting health tech and healthcare. In addition to that, we've done 2 major initiatives over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 months. One of them is integration with Health IL, which is another major organization within the health tech community, and also a strategic partnership with Startup Nation Central, all towards how do we actually centralize and do as much as we can to promote all of our various activities. And I would say this last point is that I think one of the key differentiators of 8400 is the unique private-public partnership that it has with the government, both with Israel Innovation Authority as well as the Ministry of Health and recently the Ministry of Economy, of making sure that we can align, we can guide, we can work together. And obviously there's a lot of funding, we're going to talk about that also, of driving towards a common cause. And specifically with mental health, that's an area of focus, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you. So for those keeping track, the tool he's using is public-private partnerships, government, philanthropy. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dalia Black. I'm the CEO of Weave Impact. At Weave Impact, we deal with impact investing. For those that are not familiar with impact investing, we make an investment, like a financial investment, which we expect to see back, but we have to also see significant social impact. In the last few years, we've made over 35 impact investments here in Israel on behalf of our clients. We work with families of wealth and with philanthropic foundations and manage for them their impact investment portfolios. In the space of mental health, we have given numerous loans to NGOs that are working in the mental health space. We've given to Enosh, for those that are familiar with Enosh, we've given to Beit Izzy Shapira. And of more recent, we're managing a fund that's dealing with place-based trauma. So families who are so traumatized from events of October the 7th and cannot go back home, they can receive a financing loan to buy a home somewhere else. So we're seeing a growing interest in mental health in the space of impact investing. And for us, it's an amazing tool to be able to break ceilings in terms of gaining scalability and sustainability.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sara Tancman, founder and CEO of the Briah Foundation for Women's Health. We're a nonprofit, and we promote women's health through policy change, research, and also funding innovation within the health system. So I'd say our tool would be mostly philanthropy, but I have found that in certain areas where philanthropy can drive impact until a certain level, then I do in a private way invest in as an impact investor. So I kind of blend the tools.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gal. I'm a partner, Gal Noyman Wexler. I'm a partner at LionBird. We're an early stage digital health VC out of Tel Aviv and Chicago that has actually been around for 12 years now, starting early days of digital health. My background, I also have a PhD in clinical psychology, neuropsychology from Ben Gurion, from Professor Goran Shahar's lab. And in the past year plus already, we started, I was one of the founders and leaders of an initiative called Wartime CEO that was really all about giving entrepreneurs just objective sounding board from venture capitalists and just some support, being there for them when they are there for us, whether in reserve duty or in other situations. And we invest. So we invest in companies in the early days, and also as someone coming from the realm of psychology, I always enjoy meeting entrepreneurs, whether we invest or not, and just give them words of wisdom, advice, or introductions.
Great, thank you. So we have someone from public-private partnerships, government, world of Amutot, impact investing, pure philanthropy, who also works occasionally in the impact investment space, and now we have someone also from the financial side, from the venture investing world. And so that really leads us into this conversation, is how do all of these financial tools and vehicles can play nicely together in the sandbox to move the needle for our topic today, on accelerating mental health. And so the first question we have is, what role can impact investment play in bridging the gap between public funding and private investment? And I know that Dalia is going to have a lot to say on this topic, so maybe actually, why don't you set the table, Dalia, and then you three can think of an example from your own background of where that impact investment played a role or where it could have played a role.
Impact investing is hugely catalytic capital. So it can be used to cover the funds of a new innovative model. So an impact investor generally is much more comfortable taking higher risk, getting lower return, and using patient capital. So isn't in a hurry, not necessarily like with a VC fund where they're in a hurry to see returns and to be able to show their investors a certain return. With an impact investor, especially if it's coming from a private family foundation, they tend to have a longer breath space and not in a hurry to see their capital back. That enables them to do three things. One, they can de-risk investments for others. So an impact investor can come in first, put down Series A funding, angel funding, enabling others to come in to a lower risk environment. Two, they can bridge funding, government funding. We've done that many times. So there may be a government project which will in turn give to the NGO a certain amount of financing, but there's a gap. Impact investment very comfortably can cover a bridging gap with government funding. And three is financing innovative models. So we've heard about many interesting models over the last couple of days, and thank you to Gila and to ICAR for bringing us together. A philanthropist, an impact investor can use financing to cover startup of innovative models, and we need that type of capital. I just want to say that impact investing capital can be sourced from philanthropy. It can be sourced from company budgets. So Microsoft has a very big impact investing portfolio, for example. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be an impact investor to be able to use that sort of capital. So from our perspective, what we need is for philanthropists to think more out of the box and be prepared to use their capital in alternative ways to be able to scale.
I feel like we need a rebuttal from the philanthropists or the government. Or
So I'll give an example from the philanthropy side. In our incubator, we allow doctors, nurses, midwives, patients to come up with innovative ideas, and then we'll fund their pilot. And I find that a lot of time innovation can be very simple solutions, and the philanthropic money takes this initial risk and proof of concept for the medical system. So the example I wanted to share was in our incubator, we had a project started by two psychiatrists in Hadassah and Karem who were treating teenage girls. And they found that the teenage girls had trouble communicating with the staff about their symptoms. So their idea was to implement tablets within the unit where teenage girls could track their symptoms and how they were feeling, and also their menstrual cycle. And this, the fact that we funded this pilot and proved the impact that these tablets and this model had allowed the hospital to then continue funding this project.
I think I'll comment about the public-private piece and how basically many NGOs we're including have basically joint ventures with the government where we try to partner to drive transformative programs that the government also relies on the NGO to actually drive the execution of it. One example could be FIRE, the interoperability of data across various health organizations. And we like to say that, we're leading and everything is fantastic, but at the end of the day, we all realize when we're actually patients that, there's room for improvements, and technology can definitely play a big role there. And that's a major project that we do in collaboration with the driver of SCORP, Ministry of the Health, but we're basically a lot of the arms that actually are making it work. And we have a matching. We need to actually match the funds with the government, where we rely on philanthropy to help us drive something like that the impact is significant. And then when you look at the periphery of Israel, where it's even worse, then that's an area that we put I would say, more of an attention on. And then there's specific projects. So for instance, there's a project that relates to what's called Shichrur Chacham for mental health, about how do you make sure that when a mental health patient actually gets discharged, all of the information gets forwarded in a way that basically he or she is then told your medication is ready for you in your community clinic or where in the pharmacy, and you're not relying on them to actually go in and make sure they take their medications. And there are a lot of other examples like that. So I think across the board, and also specifically for us, that's a very, I would say, natural spot where philanthropy and government play. And then there's obviously larger sums when the government actually comes into play. Another area that, if I'll just add one more example, which is actually since the war really played a big part, is where philanthropy actually looks at startups, which they've never looked at in the past, and saying if they're actually, we can make sure that, startups in Israel almost never look at the market in Israel as an area for them to actually grow because of the fact that the market is so small and the issues that we have here, which is another something we need to improve. But if you can try to make sure that startups that are relevant to needs that we have right now, and philanthropy can also play a role there are ways to actually do that, and that's something that we've been seeing. So those are the two examples.
So I have a future question about de-risking opportunities, but I think you can respond both to that and also the role of... So why don't, from your perspective as a venture capitalist, what role can these alternative financing play, and how can they de-risk in more some of the work that you're trying to do?
I think that, first of all, from the LionBird hat, obviously, as a VC, we invest in a very small number from everything that we are seeing, and we invest in Israeli entrepreneurs here and in the States. And it's healthcare, right? So everything is impact. There's nothing that is not impact. But I think that what I've observed from Wartime CEO is definitely that we need, VCs, it differs, because if you have a very, very strong team and a very blue ocean, not a lot of competition and a very big market, we might need less proof. A lot of the times it's somewhere in between, and we need some proof. And and founders, they need money for pilots. They need money to build a product. And impact investing or philanthropy comes in where you're giving first few hundred Ks or whatnot before a VC comes in to provide that initial signal. I think I want to say something actually about the current kind of philanthropy ecosystem in Israel. I think it's very important to say we're very much used to, all of us, as angel investors, venture capitalists, whatnot, we are used to the categories of philanthropy versus investment, and that it's divided. And I think especially considering global market and a lot of challenges that were not only in Israel, people are picky. I think that one of the best thing that philanthropists are looking to support mental health solutions or startups here in Israel now is to provide that extra scoring for a startup that is providing that value. Look at it from an investor's hat, but also look at it from a philanthropist's hat. And while it's usually two separate drawers, that flexibilities of people that are well-wishers of Israel is very important, especially now, I think.
Do you have any examples of startups or projects or things that you think were changed or amplified by that mindset?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, for example, LionBird, we're a fund that is typically US first. So usually a lot of the solutions are starting with design partners in hospitals in the States, as one example. I think especially in areas like mental health, like amputees, there are specific domains. There's so much data that is here and so much value to be driven here. And you need far less funding. So taking to that, if you have a startup that you're looking at, that, maybe it's not A16Z's next, prominent fund's next startup, but they're driving true value to the OTF and building something that is meaningful. Look at it differently and remember that you are that bridge for them, that bridge to government grants also, because what we don't always say is that Israel Innovation Authority needs matching. So they need matching from that philanthropy bucket.
Actually, that's a good segue. Can you explain a little bit more about the Innovation Authority's non-dilutive matching and how government funding and government acceleration programs play into the work that we're trying to do?
Well, the IAA is, basically supports startups across the board, trying to really create the bedrock for startups to growth. And we've seen over the years that, the high tech is definitely the economic engine of this country and is a vital player for the prosperity and for the well-being of everything in Israel. If you take out the high tech outside of our economy, we might go back. We will go back decades back, and we'll remember the 1980s and basically everything that actually started changing. But so the IAA actually plays a very important role. It's a bit, I would say, trying to play an opposite role of what the market does, like investors. So it tries to go into areas that are not like the actually typical areas of what we are well known for, such as cyber or fintech and enterprise solutions. But the whole idea behind it is that it tries to provide matching funds. Everything goes back to matching. So it actually does its own due diligence. Professional investors might maybe think it needs to be better, but it gives a funding that then needs to be matched by the private market. And it's not dilutive. There's a certain element to it, but it's minutia. And it gives a very good incentive for the private market to play in. What I think is missing sometimes is actually awareness, and that's an area that I think Startup Nation Central played a major role in. I think on the healthcare side, 8400, we also want to play a bigger role, is making sure that this is more, I would say, applicable, and investors, that there are not enough investors in healthcare in Israel, I must say. There are, we would like to see more, that are aware of the opportunities that the government actually provides in that space.
So I want to play that out for a little while longer. We spoke a lot about de-risking, and we've spoken about how to create these innovations that are useful for Israel, right? We're here to solve the problem for Israel. Eventually, we'll solve it globally, and then, as Gila said, we'll close in 2035. But until then, we're here focused on Israel. And as any funder or venture capitalist knows, startups can't scale in Israel. They need to go global. So when the Israeli Innovation Authority is funding this for a solution, and then these startups aren't translating their work into Hebrew, or they're not putting their measurements in metric, they're only putting it in whatever measurements we use in America, right? So how can philanthropy, impact investment, and the government and all of these partners work together to ensure that these government subsidized innovations are reaching not only Israel, but reaching the most at risk or the periphery who could most benefit from these innovations?
I can bring an example. Some of you might be familiar with Jolt. It's a training platform. So Jolt is a startup, an Israeli startup, and a philanthropist's focus was specifically on Israel's periphery, on the north and on the south. Now, for Jolt to take its services to the north and the south, it wasn't economically viable. And so the philanthropist said, I will cover the difference in order for it to be economically acceptable to you, so that the service is available in the north and the south. And for that to happen, first of all, the philanthropist really had to think outside of the box, because it's really not obvious that a grant would go to an Israeli startup. But at the end of the day, the philanthropist had a certain social mission, and by working together with the startup, they got much closer to their mission. I personally think working with for-profit businesses can often end up being much more efficient and scalable than alternative options. So that's one model where a philanthropist can literally cover the cost of, for example, translating a mental health service into Hebrew. So that's something that we've seen. I personally came across that in the last year. I couldn't believe it. An Israeli startup that has an amazing service to comfort those that have lost family members in their first circle. And the service isn't available in Hebrew. The company sits in Israel. They've built the platform. And when I asked them, how can that be? They said, well, it's not economically viable for us. And so we introduced them to a philanthropist who ended up funding the translation. Now, it's really not a big deal. There's a certain budget, it gets covered, and then a whole country gets access to an amazing mental health service. So again, it's thinking outside of the box, being okay with giving a grant to a business, not obvious. It's okay being a startup or an entrepreneur and receiving philanthropy, also not obvious. And I think, as Sara mentioned this already, like the secret is blending, learning how to blend different financial sources. Because once we all think out of the box and we work together and we understand, okay, the government financing is going to come, but it's going to take another year, and I haven't got enough capital from my investors that I can return with a return, then okay, maybe there's a gap to accept philanthropy or impact investing.
I have a similar example, but this is one that hasn't happened yet. But we're hoping. I'm involved with a startup that is developing a device to detect drink spiking and prevent date rape. And as part of the business plan that they're working on, the hope is to have the first devices, which will still be big devices. So they need to raise money to make the devices smaller. And the hope is that philanthropists will actually purchase the first devices and donate them to different colleges and universities so that they can use them at the parties. And then we would actually have Philanthropy as the first clients, with that money enabling the further development.
I would love to hear from the perspective of venture capital, how do we make sure that there's mechanisms put in place that these tools are reaching Israeli audiences, and how that plays into your financial model as well in being accountable to your LPs?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, non-dilutive funding is so important, getting more grants out there for important areas that are needed to be covered and having them executed in reasonable time so you don't have to invest a lot of time on it. Look at the EIC, the European Union, as a great example to learn from, I think. NIH now, I don't know. But one of the things that is really critical is to understand that, you know, they're getting traction. So they're building a product, it's being used, it shows the result, the outcome, they're getting revenues from it. We have a portfolio company, Rhino Health. They enable data exchange between different hospitals, research consortiums, and whatnot. Their first publication a few years back in Nature Medicine was with Suta contributing a very significant part of the data. So in terms of making it worthwhile, you know, sometimes it's more challenging when you're, you know, doing the product in Hebrew or whatnot, but a lot of the time, especially in markets like the market is now, getting more revenue and getting more development in your product is not a bad thing. The management needs to remain focused, but it doesn't necessarily have to harm. You just have to manage it smart in an intelligent way.
Do you think that mentality is new, is something that changed after October 7th, or you think that that's always been good for business?
This mentality of catalyzing.
The mentality that Israel really should be a lab for these innovations first and foremost, and there's opportunity for them to learn, you know, product market fit and scale in Israel, and then kind of move abroad.
No, so I don't think it's connected to October 7th as much as current just global market conditions that are not related to what's happening here actually at all, like to all startups. In all startups, VCs are now paying more attention to revenues and more traction and have higher expectations. I would put an asterisk on it and say that, you know, for us as a fund that is focused on, for example, U.S. commercialization, one of the things that is really important is that the right products be used here. Meaning, if you're a startup that is looking to solve the problem of the workflow or the efficiency of a primary care physician in New York, then most likely, you know, looking at the workflow of a PCP in Israel doesn't mean anything. But if you're doing this in parallel, or if it's something that is more connected, for example, take a company that does AI-enabled drug delivery or drug discovery. If they're doing a pilot with Sheba around T-cell therapy for oncology, it's the same for them, the same lift, and even probably easier than to do it with Johns Hopkins, as an example.
I hope so. What about very at-risk or peripheral populations? I want to make sure that Sheba's in Ramat Gan, right? So, but how do we make sure that these innovations are reaching the people way out who need them most, who are not always close to the Startup Nation central home of Tel Aviv?
Can I add one sentence
Of course.
on that? Because it's important. So actually the founder, the entrepreneur of this company actually just told me that because they had good results with Sheba, that they're now going to do it with multiple other hospitals in the periphery. So it's a very important point. And a lot of the time the lift or the question is not necessarily Sheba and Jefferson Hospital versus Briah, then Israel versus US.
As far as the periphery, I mean, one specific program that we're launching now is with Briah Hospital, that they're now building the rehab, the largest rehab, I would say, facility north of Ra'anana. And our goal there is, and it's not just specifically for Briah, it's actually for the entire North, is how do we enable the physicians and all of the healthcare employees there to be as connected as possible to innovation, to understand the language of startups, to see how they can implement startups within their health organizations, to create that level of comfort. And obviously when AI comes is how do they become AI, how AI literacy improves and becomes a area of strength within Israel, and specifically within the periphery. And we're trying to integrate the different hospitals in that regard. So I think that's also another area which is more maybe perhaps on the training piece, on the connecting startups to the various facilities, and not to be just with the ones that are close to home here in Tel Aviv.
I have a Harif question for the next question, but feel free to respond to. Nope. Okay. So are we live streaming? I just want to warn you, we're live streaming, because I'm going to ask, because until now we've been very positive. I'm going to ask now, what do you see as the biggest financial or structural gap preventing mental health solutions in Israel from scaling, and what needs to change? And take that however you want, and maybe use initials instead of actual names if you have people who you think are the structural gaps.
Yeah.
Okay, so be angry when you say it.
She's polite.
I'm a Midwesterner, so.
I can talk about the government. First of all, there's no tax incentives in Israel at all for doing impact investing. This is something that people have been pushing for a long time. Just to give a comparison, in the UK there are tax incentives, in the US there are tax incentives, and it should, in my personal opinion, be obvious that the government would want to push and promote people to be investing in companies that are doing social good. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the government has never done a Yozma-style venture in relation to impact funds. So if you all remember, the government has a program where they provide financing to get venture capital funds off the ground to promote the venture capital industry here in Israel. They have never done that with an impact fund in Israel. So very little support from the government in terms of creating alternative financing sources for social good. Which, of course, therefore makes it difficult and less appealing for investors to focus on areas such as mental health, etc., etc. So, first of all, I think we should make change in the government and in what the government's doing, but we'll leave politics aside. In fact, I'll take the microphone away before I say anything.
I think the biggest gap when it comes to women's mental health is a gap in data and research. And specifically, one of the things that are lacking for centuries is research regarding the connections between hormonal changes and mental health. So in medicine, the fields of endocrinology/gynecology and psychiatry are completely separate, and there's not enough data connecting the two of women who postpartum depression and during menopause, and young girls who start menstruating. We all know as women that there are mental implications, but for the medical system to know how to react to hormonal changes, there has to be fundamental research. And I may not look angry, but the fact that there is no one thought to seriously research this area is insane, in my opinion. And this is not only in Israel, this is worldwide. There's just a huge data gap. And I think that, first of all, we need a lot of philanthropic money put into the initial research for innovation to actually happen, because there's just not enough knowledge. And there's going to be need for all sorts of blended tools of investment and philanthropy to solve this problem.
Dalia, I don't know what you're talking about. They did a phenomenal job up until now. um, it's okay. It's okay. We're good. We're good. I think that from a philanthropy perspective, when we're talking about the government, one of the things that is important is to enable, you talked from the tax perspective. I think that we saw in the first months, in the first year, post October 7th, we have a lot of investors of the fund that are in the United States. And they get all these requests, as you probably all get, to donate to hospitals, to donate to the army. If there is anything that our government needs to do, is free these individuals to continue investing in our startup nation instead of providing support for organizations that are government funded. I think first and foremost, Israeli tech, 75, I think, to 80% is based on foreign investors, 90% even. We need them to have funds to invest in the startups and to allocate it in growth, prosperity, innovation for years to come in academia and not in managing current fires. So I think that's the most important thing to talk about. And in terms of talking about mental health specifically, this one is for entrepreneurs. I think one of the things that is most important is to create diverse solutions, whether we're talking about side effects of mental health medications, whether we're talking about providing the actual care, whether we're talking about different populations, creating a wide array of solutions in mental health for them to be able to later on manage the test of time and foreign investors and turn into good companies as well.
I'll add one more comment. I think we're facing I don't know if we can consider this a national crisis, but mental health is going to be something that we're going to have with us for many years to come. It's not short term. And we have a lot of amazing abilities in Israel. In particular, it's quick mobilization and ability to solve problems quickly, but long-term planning and longevity is probably not one of our strongest assets. And I think we need this for this challenge. And in order to do that, it's government, but it's not just government. It's ability to have a collective effort and plan ahead and execute over time. And I think ICAR is probably taking a major role here. And I think this is wonderful that you're pulling this off. And I think there are other organizations that want to support and help on how do we actually mobilize and see this through, because it's going to be with us. Unfortunately, for years to come, but we can overcome it if we do it right and plan ahead. And I think funding then is a mechanism of it, but it's not the only thing.
What you said about the fact that we need people to free up their capital so they could start investing and donating in the things that deserve the support, as opposed to this kind of filling the emergency gap. I'll always be reminded of in one of my investor philanthropist networks, at one point they were trying to buy a helicopter for one of the Army units, and thankfully there was an alumni of that Army unit in the group, and he said, guys, we can't buy them a helicopter. That's not how philanthropy works. Albeit, I'm sure Hatzalah and Magen David of Dome have bought helicopters with philanthropic dollars, very different than buying one from the Army. But I want to end by asking all of you, so yes, let's get back to a time where we can donate to all these wonderful amutot and invest in Israeli startups and not worry about helicopters. I want to ask, my final question is, if you had a magic wand or fairy dust and you could sprinkle it on a problem and that problem would go away, what problem would that be? And then also give you a couple of seconds just to pitch whatever it is that you're working on. Maybe tell us a little bit more about Wartime CEOs, any of your other projects. So the floor is yours for the next 6 minutes, and each of you have a minute and change to do that. So let's start on this side, and we'll move to the end. Go ahead.
Cool. So first and foremost, Wartime CEO, I'm very proud that Startup Nation Central took a substantial kind of took it under their wings in their day-to-day operation. It was amazing for us to see because 300 startups across all different domains passed through it, 60 female CEOs, which was something I was particularly proud of. I actually want to pause and go back to my roots of mental health. One of the things that people don't necessarily know about me is that I'm a big dog lover. And one of the things that are happening now in Israel is because people have either economic challenges or people passed away or evacuated from the home or whatnot. We have a ton of dogs, amazing dogs, pure breed also dogs, in shelters. And dogs are amazing for therapy. And I'm very, very surprised up until now I didn't see an initiative, whether a nonprofit or whether a company or whatnot, trying to think, wait, if we have all these people now in emotional distress, whether in nursing homes, whether it's loneliness, communities of kibbutzim shattered and whatnot, children dealing with trauma, and we have so many dogs being put down and that are in shelters and they're available and they're friendly and looking for people to pet them. I am dying to see someone pick up. If I had the hours in the day, I would do it myself, but someone connect and really use animals as the catalyzer to drive better mental health, also with technology. I really believe it can drive amazing change.
So I'm going to connect to the gap that I mentioned earlier, the data gap in women's health. And I think if the Kupot Cholim, the HMOs, with their very impressive data that's used all over the world, the Israeli databases, and if we would start implementing menstrual data as a vital sign. So when you go to the doctor and you get your blood pressure tested or your weight and all these other things that are considered vital signs, if we start looking at menstruation as a vital sign in Israel, we could be the first databases to include menstrual information and the knowledge all around the world that could be derived from this in mental health and in general would be amazing. So that would be my dream if I had a magic wand. And about what we're doing now, so I've been talking mostly about our incubator. We just finished our 5th cohort of our incubator, and just to see what these entrepreneurs have been able to do during a year of war in a hospital in Tzfat, and it's just been amazing. And our next cohort, the 6th cohort, is going to be focused on bridging the gap for women's health after the war. We just conducted a research with over 1,000 women. We started looking mostly at dislocated women, and then in general we had over 1,000 participants, and the health gaps that we've found are just incredible and long-term. So the goal is for the next incubator to find innovative solutions for these problems.
My wish would be to see millions more dollars freed up for the mental health sector. I think that money exists, but foundations, families are still not ready to carve out capital for alternative style financing. And I think that the time is now. If there's one thing that we've heard in the last 2 days, and I can just say from a personal perspective, I don't think anyone in the room is not touched by the speakers that we've heard on a personal level, touching on our children and on the people that we're with every day. Like we don't have time to waste. Like if we want to really make a change to the mental health of our nation, we need to be doing it now. And I'm really happy to speak to anyone after this session and provide guidance on how you can make that happen. So my wish is that we be bolder, be prepared to take risk and to put to our boards or to our families using capital to invest in more scalable solutions for the huge problem that we're dealing with. My personal pitch would be about Rehome. Rehome is a debt fund to help families who went through huge trauma on the 7th of October and can't go back to their original homes, to start rehabilitating in a more secure, warm environment for themselves and their families. We're looking for two things. One is we're looking for families. So if anyone here in the audience is familiar with a family that does not have the mental capacity to go back and is looking to rehouse somewhere else, then we're looking for families. And we've raised half of the $12.5 million fund, and we're looking to raise the rest.
Oh, wait, let Ari go.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
I'll speak in darkness. There you go. We have the music too. I'll say two very quick things to wrap up. On the one thing, I really envision optimization of our ability to work with the government, the public-private partnership. There we go. In recent months and maybe even years, I've got to know amazing people in the government. I'm not talking about the political space. I'm talking about the people, the public servants that are working there, that we need them there. And we need to make sure that they know that they have partners and that we want to support them and they want to support us. And they're very dedicated and they're working in probably not easy circumstances. So we need to be open and optimistic about ability to do things together with them. And the second thing I'd like to say is from an 8400 perspective that I've been here for the last 4 months, I've gotten to know amazing people. There is so much talent and there's so many people with great visions and ideas that are across the country in the healthcare space and in the mental health space. And my hope is just to enable them to tap their potential and ability to help our country.